And now it's time to preview an upcoming game with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at another Kickstarter preview game. This time we're going to take a look at the GS system, which is a CCG-style card game in which each player will be bringing their own constructed deck to the table in the hopes of outplaying and outdamaging their opponent, reducing them to 0 life before the opponent can do the same to them. This game does have a little bit of an extra mechanism in it in which you're going to be utilizing soul stamp cards, which are cards that have been removed from your playing field, placed into a special resource pile, and then can be used in order to activate special abilities of your cards that are still in play. Real quick, why don't we take a look at what you're going to get inside the box with the reminder that these are prototype components, not final quality components. We'll see how the game plays, and then we'll come back here and I'll sum it all up for you. So here you can see the components for GS system laid out. Now this central area here is not a component, but it is a representation of what your play area will look like in the game. As a reminder, these are prototype components, so the decks you see here are going to be prototype cards and will change before publication of the game. Each player will have their deck of cards that they'll bring to the game, and these are going to be constructed decks that they make from whatever cards they have. There's no real limitations on what you can put into your deck, except for that you may not have more than 4 of a copy of a card. Otherwise, you're going to be able to use whatever cards you would like to build your deck and hopefully outplay your opponent. The playing field here is divided into a very similar CCG feeling playing field. You have a support zone, which is basically where your resources are going to go. Now, in the GS system, all cards can be used as resources, and when you play them into your support zone, they'll either generate 1 or 2 resources at the start of your turn, dependent on the card. You'll also see, of course, we have a place for our deck, and we have the revival chamber, which is essentially your discard pile, where cards that are completely dead, but could theoretically be brought through a game effect, are going to be placed. You'll also see you have a playing field with a front and back row. This playing field will represent where your characters are going to go when they're trying to attack or defend yourself so that you don't run out of life. And these will be active characters that will have abilities and do various things throughout the game. You'll see there's an area that you're not familiar with from other CCGs, and this is called the Soul Stamp Zone, which will hold cards that have been removed from your playing field or sometimes your support zone. They'll go into the Soul Stamp Zone and become a new type of resource that can be used to activate abilities of some of the characters that are going to be in your playing field. So it adds an extra type of resource that, kind of takes your units directly from play. They don't go straight to your discard pile, but instead become a resource to be used for your other units that are still kicking and active in the playing field. Now that we've seen how the playing field is going to look like, let's talk a little bit about how the game is going to play. So as I mentioned, each player is going to come to the game with a deck of cards, and that deck of cards will be constructed of 40 to 60 cards. Now, as I said again, the regulations on building these are pretty lax. You may not have more than 4 copies of a card, but other than that, you can pretty much use any card with any other card in order to try and build your deck and outsmart your opponent. So you're going to have this deck of cards containing no more than 4 of each card. But what does a card look like? Each card will have a layout something similar to this. Now again, a reminder, this could change before the release of the game, but this is somewhat what a card's going to look like. You'll see in the top right corner here, there is a cost to play the card. This cost could range from very cheap to very high, depending on what the ability of the card is. Some currently go up to 7, and you'll need 7 resources in order to play this. Beneath that, you'll see some of the artwork for the game, and this artwork is pretty near to completion, so you'll see that it looks pretty good. We have some anime-style artwork, and that's going to be on many of the cards. You'll see they have different cards representing different characters, all very well drawn and representative of the characters in the game. Beneath that, you're going to see the ability of the card, and these abilities range widely. Currently, we see that this one here is going to allow you to kind of work on other players' characters, dealing some damage to them, or reducing their abilities, putting freeze markers on your opponent's characters and then damaging them for having freeze markers on them. Other abilities will allow you to play tokens into the board on your own area, or play things from your deck, or increase the power of the character based on what else is in play. So there's going to be many different types of abilities you can have on different cards in the game. Beneath all of that, you're going to see the identifier for the card. This one is called Cyrno, who is going to be his unique identifier, and you're not allowed to have more than 4 of this card in the deck. You can also do that by the artwork, of course, and figure out that the artwork's the same, the character's probably the same, and you can't have more than 4 of those. In the bottom left-hand corner here, you're going to see the values identifying the toughness or the attack, the 2000 here, and the life of this card. So it has 2000 attack, 1000 life. This is going to be how much damage it deals when it hits another character, and the bottom number is how much damage it can receive before it's going to be moved into the Soul Stamp Zone. And then from the Soul Stamp Zone, it will become active in having an ability to be discarded for somebody else's ability that's currently in play. That is basically the layout of a card. All of that data will be similar on all the other cards, although the abilities, the life total, and the attack will differ, and of course the casting cost. But throughout the game, you're going to be able to kind of reference these cards in the same way in order to play them to your play area, and hopefully use them for generating resources, attacking your opponent, and winning the game. At the start of a game, each player will shuffle their deck and they'll place it in their play area, forming their deck from which they'll be drawing cards throughout the game. At the start of the game, each player will draw 7 cards, and you're also going to draw a card at the start of your turn in order to add a new card to your hand. Now, you're not going to do this on the first turn. You're going to start with 7 cards, but each player will have their hand of 7 cards. You're then going to go into the support phase, and this is when you can play units from your hand into that support zone I was talking about. These are the units that are going to generate resources on your turn. Now, dependent on the card, they will generate 1 or 2 resources. So you'll play a card to your area, it may generate 1 or 2 resources. And then this will be kind of your resource management area. Now you have to realize that when you're playing your resources out here, they're likely not going to be in your play area and thus won't give you their attack abilities, their power, their life. You won't be able to use them to defend yourself, but you are going to use them to generate resources to play your other characters to the board. Then you're going to move on to your first main phase, essentially, when you're going to be able to take actions with the cards from your hand, playing them to the table into the play zone. When you do this, you're going to have to spend the resources from your support zone, be it 1 or 2 resources that they generate. You need to spend exact resources in order to cast or play your characters from your hand into the play zone, making them active for attacking or defending or using their abilities. If you cannot pay exact resources for a unit, you're not allowed to play it. This means that if something costs 4, you could use 2 units that generate 2 resources, or 2 units that generate 1 and a resource that generates 2. But you could not, for example, use 3 resources that generate 1 or a resource that generates 2, because that would be 5. Or if something cost 1, you simply couldn't use a unit that generates 2 resources to play it. You would have to have one that generates simply 1. Anyhow, in this phase, you'll be able to play as many of your resources to the play area as you would like, and these are going to become active for attacking, defending, and using their abilities. After you've done with this, you're going to go into the combat phase, and basically any unit, when it's played, can attack the other player the turn it comes into play. So, this unit, since it's the first turn, it actually can't do that, but every turn after that, you're allowed to attack. There's a little bit of a stipulation on the first turn preventing you from attacking. But every turn after that, there is no type of summoning sickness, and your unit can attack the turn it comes out. Attacking works much like it does in many other CCGs. When you do this, you're going to put the unit out into play. It's going to be designated an attacker if you choose to attack with it, and your opponent will be able to block. When damage is assigned, you're going to assign damage based on the top number here, the 1500 in this case, although there's a 1500 for his life as well. But you're going to be able to assign damage to whatever the blocker is based on that number. You are allowed to block with multiple creatures if you're the defender, and then the attacker would choose the damage to assign in whichever order he would like. And if a unit takes more damage than it has life, in this case 1500, or in the case of other units, you'll see something like 3000. If it takes more damage than it has life, it's going to move into your soul stamp zone, where it will become a resource to be used for abilities. If it doesn't take that much damage, it's simply going to stay on the field, but damage is done in both directions. Both the attacker and defender take damage, and if either of them is damaged beyond their life, they're moved into the respective soul stamp zone of the player that controls them. After you've declared your attackers and your opponent has declared their blockers, you'll assign damage, as I just mentioned. But anything that's not blocked will get through to your opponent and deal the damage of their attack to that opponent. And of course, this is the point of the game, to deal enough damage to your opponent to remove them from the game, put them down to 0 life, and of course, win. Now, after you finish with all of your attacks, anything that's been blocked and dealt lethal damage moves into the soul stamp zone. And essentially you've gone through that whole combat phase. You're going to move on to your next action phase, where you can again play cards from your hand using the resources that are in your support zone to the board in order to kind of beef up your defenses or your attack abilities for the next turn. Now, that's basically the end of your turn. You're going to check and see at the end of your turn if you have more than 7 cards in hand from any abilities that let you draw up, and then you're going to pass the turn to the next player, who will then take their turn, starting with the support phase, generating resources. Of course, they'll draw a card at the start of their turn, but they'll generate resources, play out characters to the board, attack in the combat phase, and continue with their next action phase until their turn ends and again passes back to you. But there's one unique thing that we haven't talked about yet, and that's when cards are in this soul stamp zone, before they move into your discard pile. Cards will have abilities with this little symbol right here. It may be hard to see, but it's right by my middle finger there. And this is the soul stamp symbol. This is an ability that can be used by moving a card from your soul stamp zone into what is essentially your discard pile. These abilities kind of use these resources that you've lost through the game by attacking, defending, or having them placed there through a destruction effect in order to generate some type of special effect. For example, this one says that you may summon a unit from your hand and return it back to your hand at the end of the turn. And these abilities are going to vary based on different characters. Some will have them, some will not. And of course, you need to have the resources available in your soul stamp area in order to activate them. These can be activated anytime you have resources here available, and can be activated multiple times if you have the resources to do so. So you can use these to your benefit and hopefully outsmart, outplay, outwit, and of course outdamage your opponent. Through the use of these abilities, the best play of your card, the best deck construction, and of course going back and forth defending and attacking with your units, you hope to deal lethal damage to your opponent before they can deal lethal damage to you. Whichever player manages to do this the best will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is GS System, currently up on Kickstarter and looking for your support. This is a relatively simple CCG style game that I think a lot of players could get into pretty easily. The game offers you a nice anime style of art. It offers you a pretty easy deck building system in which resources generate 1 or 2 resources, not of a specific color, but are able to be spent on whatever cards you might have in your deck, although you must spend exactly in order to cast them. It also offers a little bit of a unique mechanism in the form of that soul stamp area, where you can have resources that have kind of been removed from the game. Your units that have died have been placed in that soul stamp area, but still provide a purpose throughout the game, allowing you to activate special abilities of cards that are in play that have those soul stamp abilities. So, if this sounds interesting to you, I know GS System is currently up, looking for support, and would be glad to have you. If that sounds good to you, check it out, see what it's all about, and perhaps even pledge.
Thanks for watching our review today. For more information about board games, as well as the #1 board game audio podcast, check out Dicetower.com for reviews, interviews, and more. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.